Vira também, mas no final foi difícil. Se ela quer fazer prática,
Mas é só 2 dias, pessoal. E hoje a moça ainda chegou atrasada, não. A Fer que falou. A Karen começou a dar aula pra ela, porque o avião
Marcelo, start again.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words about you. Just a minute.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to turn my mic on. See if it works. Maybe this one will be better. Whoops. Okay, now we go. Well, dear fellows, mentors, friends, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to one of the more invented and creative guys that I've known for the many, many years to come, hiPUC. Javi is a 100% Stanford guy. He was born in Stanford. He did his graduation at Stanford in mechanical engineering. He did his master at Stanford also. And finally, he did his biodesign. He was a biodesign fellow. So I met Javi for almost 5 years ago, Javi. Can you believe that? And we've been chatting and doing this health innovation program here in Brazil since then. And the more I get to know Javi, the more I get to admire him as a great person. And now he's also from our team. He's a father. So that makes a lot of input to his career. So Javi, I know it's Saturday. I know you have a lot to do with your little boy. And I'm very, very proud and very happy to have you here with us. So the audience is all yours. Please jump in.
Great. Thanks, Marcelo. And bom dia, everyone. Tudo bem? Okay, that is all the Portuguese I know, so you have to.
I thought you learned and you will give your lecture in Portuguese today. Didn't you say that to me?
You are mistaken. Tudo English from now on. So I apologize in advance. I will try to speak clearly and not have too much of an American accent. If you guys have any questions, please raise your hand. Marcelo, maybe you can help identify people that have questions and can transmit that information to me. But thank you again, Marcelo, for the kind introduction. And I wanted to say it's an honor to be part of this program. I think Marcelo and the team have done an excellent job creating this program over the years and evolving it over time. And I think this year is especially interesting because it is a new experiment, really, in teaching this methodology with a new topic of antimicrobial resistance. And I'm excited to see what is going to come out of this program and what ideas and new inventions and concepts that you all will over the next few weeks. And I think my role here, to give you guys some idea, is as a process mentor. I don't know anything about this. I'm a mechanical engineer, as Marcelo said in his introduction. So I cannot help really in that regard. But what we're teaching as part of this program is the methodology. The methodology can be applied across this topic in antimicrobial resistance, or it can be applied in any field, and it relates to a lot of similar methodologies, specifically design thinking, but it's just on health. And I think that's where the health focus really makes it, combined with this methodology, really makes it a powerful one. So today what we're going to talk about is the beginning. How do you identify needs through observations, through research? And how do you define those needs, create need statements, and eventually develop needs specifications which give understanding? And so I'm into the slides here. Can you guys see my slides now?
Yeah, it's coming on. We can see your screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great.
Sometimes, Javi, your voice is cracking.
So if you don't mind, if there is a long time interruption, I'll ask you to repeat if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay. I'll just check in every few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so first I'm going to talk about transforming observations into needs. And because in your next session, my understanding is you're doing a lot of observations in the field. And so we're going to help you with some tools, to create observations and then transform those into needs. And I'll tell you what the difference is in the next few minutes here. So observation is really the core first step in finding the problem. Now, our background in the program is largely in the hospital, but as you guys can imagine, this can apply to anywhere, any field. And observation is really the core part of the program in the sense that you see for yourself what are the real problems. Because you can read about it in a book, or you can talk to an expert that gives you a second opinion, but being a filter when you have those experiences. And those are valuable filters. You talk to an expert, and that person has a lot of insight and has a strong opinion. But it's exactly that they have their own opinion. So having direct observations lets you see firsthand what the problem is, form your own opinion, and oftentimes you'll see through some of the biases and filters that other people have when they present to you a problem or an observation. Really, the idea that, and this is something that Steve Jobs famously said, is that people don't know what they want. So if you ask a customer, what is it that you really want? They often don't know how to articulate. They often have a very narrow mind of things that they already have, and they don't know what their problems are even. And so going in and observing, following users, for example, and bringing in your fresh set of eyes. That's the other really important thing. You have different backgrounds, you have different experiences, different training. You're bringing those fresh perspectives to the field. And so by going and seeing it for yourself, it allows you to define your own perspective in that problem or in that field. Did you follow me, Marcelo, there? Can you hear me?
There's a little bit of crack, but it's okay. We can follow you.
You can follow? Let me,
yeah.
Maybe
if you turn off your camera, because it seems there's floating in the connection. If you turn off your camera, maybe we can listen to you better, because I think the traffic will be... Okay, there you go. Uh-oh.
You can turn off your camera too, because I'm not able to see the audience. Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay,
great.
Presentation's back now.
Okay, so the nuts and bolts, what do we mean when we talk about what we're talking about? So first you have an observation, then that boils down into a problem and a population and an outcome, and I'll go into more details of what that means. And then that leads you to need statements. And we don't just mean one need statement. Actually, from a single observation, you'll be able to identify many need statements. And so we'll go into what all this means in a few minutes. The next step there is that you vary your data sources. So again, like I mentioned, observation is just one component. But then you also look at literature and the research in the field, as well as getting clinical feedback and input from experts. And when I say clinical, I really mean across the board. It could be expert opinion, expert feedback in the field that you're looking at. So in terms of observations, what do they do? Like, what are they doing on a day-to-day basis? And then in terms of the feedback, it's what are they talking about? And then in terms of the literature, it's what's the data say? And so like we mentioned before, single observation could lead to many needs. And I'll give you guys an example of this. And actually, we're going to work through an example about halfway through our session today. So when you're observing, you will want to review your notes immediately after the observation and interview if possible. You want to highlight areas of greatest interest, and that's where your prep work will help. So you should be reading and researching ahead of time about the field and about the area that you're going to be going into. And maybe maybe Marcelo and the team can provide some pre-reading materials before those field visits next week. And you may want to do additional research.
Yeah, Ravi, if you mind, if you don't mind, just interruption. We already talked to them. They have at least 3 to 4 manuscript that they will have to read before the visits of the next week. So they have plenty material to read. Sorry to interrupt you.
Awesome. No, perfect. So that's perfect. So in the thing, you should be able to highlight what are the questions that you have, what are the potential high areas of interest that you should be focused on, because you only have a limited time. You have only a few hours, I imagine, at each of the visits. And so how do you maximize your time there? The prep work is really the most critical part. Then you want to synthesize your observations into summaries and scenarios, and then share it with your team. Trade notes, unpack what you found. And then you can organize your notes in the following ways. In terms of activities, what are the people doing? What are the specific steps they're going through? Environments, what are the characters and functions of the space? What are the interactions between objects and across the distances? What are the different objects or devices that people have in the using? And who's there? What are their roles and their behaviors? And that really leads into stakeholder analysis, which we have a whole section on later on. And the way I like to look at it is starting out with the what, how, and then why, but starting out first with the what. And so, when you're observing things, starting with the concrete, what's actually happening, the real facts of the issue. Don't interpret anything just yet. Using descriptive phrases to be as detailed as possible. And then the last bullet here, quantify. This is, I'd say, one of the most important parts of observation. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, it was issues with contamination last year. How many issues of contamination? How many instances? Were they around a certain part of the year versus other parts of the year? How detailed and specific can you get? And can you quantify those issues as well? When you quantify something, you have a much better idea of the magnitude of the problem versus if it's more of a just descriptive kind of description, really, of the problem. And then how? So once you start to identify the detail, then how are things happening? How is the user doing what they're doing? Are they doing it in a rushed manner? Are they doing it in a slow manner? Are they in pain? Are they smiling? Are they crying? Are they impacting users or surroundings negatively or positively? So what are the processes that are being used and how are they being done, and what are the characteristics of how they're being done? And then after those two steps, then it's about why. So then it's time to step out on a limb, make some informed guesses on the motivation, on the emotions. What is the reason why people are doing it the way they're doing it? Is it because there's evidence to support it, or is it because that's just the way they do it? And that's how they've been doing it for many years. So this will, by doing this last step, it will reveal your own assumptions and will show you which areas need additional testing, and maybe with follow-up interviews and follow-up research. So then you want to construct a summary of each interesting scenario. So I've created a case study here, and I'm going to read through it just to give you guys an idea of what a scenario might be. And I found this in an article, so it's not really a reading, but it's sort of a cheating. But I wanted to give you guys just an idea of what a case might be in a hospital setting. So the observation is that a woman in her 70s was admitted to the acute care hospital with primary diagnosis of systemic inflammatory response syndrome, resulting from an infected right hip seroma. She arrived in the United States earlier in the month after an extended visit to India. During the 2 years preceding this U.S. hospitalization, the patient had multiple hospitalizations in India related to a right femur fracture and subsequent osteomyelitis of the right femur and hip. The most recent in June 2016. Testing of a wound specimen revealed that her infection was by a strain of carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, Klebsiella pneumoniae, which was resistant to 14 different antibiotics, all of the options that were available in the hospital. A sample sent to the CDC showed that nothing available in the US could treat this infection, 26 total antibiotics. A survey, point prevalence survey using rectal swab specimens and conducted among patients in the same unit did not identify additional CRE. Active surveillance for multi-drug resistant bacilli, including CRE, conducted in the county region around the hospital and ongoing, but no additional CRE have been identified. So this is a real case. This woman ended up dying of her infection or due to shock related to her infection. And I don't know anything about this bacteria except that it sounds very, very aggressive and dangerous. Maybe Marcelo has some additional insights here. But we're going to revisit this observation later. You can see here, there's no real interpretation in this observation. I haven't said what is a solution. I don't have any solutions to anything yet. I haven't even really identified what the problems are. I'm like a journalist. I'm reporting the facts of what's going on as much as possible and as detailed as possible and as quantified as possible. There's even, there would have been more opportunity to be more quantified here, but I had to pull this just from the article. And so we're going to revisit this case a little bit later in the presentation, but I wanted to give you an idea of what a detailed observation might look like. Are there any questions? Okay. Can you guys hear me? Marcelo, you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you. Let me just check if there's no question. Any questions
Okay.
so far? I have one comment. I love this slide.
This slide right now.
Exactly this one you're talking about, the carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae.
Oh, this one, in a scenario. I thought I should give you a relevant case, Marcelo.
Sorry, Javi?
So I was saying I wanted the case to be relevant to the course. Because we have all these examples, but the examples are mostly around hospitals and clinical problems. But this, I'll give you one example with the product.
Okay, perfect.
So we'll come back. Class, we're going to come back to this example. I'm going to actually have you work on it as a way to generate need statements. Okay, so just get ready for that. So you'll have to pay attention to the next 30 minutes to be able to do that effectively. So what are the other observation cues? So if you're in a setting, maybe in a hospital or in a wastewater treatment facility, what are the comments that you can hear, or what are the things that you see that trigger your interest, trigger the idea that this is something worth exploring further? And so here's a list of just some examples. This is, again, more focused on hospital setting, but you can imagine translating this across to other things as well. So, for example, if you get a comment from a clinician or from a worker, a nurse, or any kind of worker, saying, if I only had a way to ... That's kind of obvious. If I only had a way to do something, they're clearly looking for a better way. However, there's the other side too, which is, this is just how we do things. If you ever ask someone a question and they say, why are you doing something? And they don't have an answer. They just say, that's just the way we do things. That's how we've always done things. That is usually a very interesting comment worth exploring further. Trying to understand, how did that practice get started, and why haven't they looked at other options, or why is that considered the best option, is usually a very ripe source for potential innovation and room for improvement, because maybe they just haven't looked into that area and tried to improve it that much. There's also an area where there could be a lot of inertia, a lot of resistance to change. And so it needs to be carefully explored as you dig into it. But that's one of my favorite comments, is just, this is just how we do things. Then there's customization or jury rigging. If people have used current products in an unintended way, so they basically change the way it's been used. There's a really good example of someone who was interviewing a patient, insulin pump, a diabetes patient. And the engineer was asking this patient, oh, how was your experience with this pump?
Javi, your voice is going down. It's getting too low.
Oh, can you hear me now? Hello, hello.
It's far away now.
Far away. Hello, can you hear me now? Hello.
Oh, let me try. Oh, you are far away.
So there was a story of a patient, a diabetes patient, who was using an insulin pump. An engineer was doing research to try to improve the pump and asked the patient, what is your experience with the pump? How do you like it? And the patient said, oh, I love it. It works great. It's like everything I want. And then they started to observe the patient in their house. And they saw that the patient had all this duct tape over certain buttons on the pump. And the engineer said, why do you have the duct tape on the pump? The patient said, oh, it's not a big problem. This button keeps getting pushed, so I had to duct tape it over so it wouldn't keep getting pushed. It's an example of someone who's actually, if you ask them the question, they would say everything's great. Maybe the patient doesn't want to upset the engineer. Happy with the fact that they have an insulin pump. Don't they forget about all my. But when you start to do the observation, you can see actually those changes. And
are you there? We cannot listen to you.
What are the ways to improve that person's experience? Yeah.
Javi, I'm going to try to call you in WhatsApp and see if your voice coming. Eu não vou conseguir.
Okay, sure.
Javi, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we cannot listen to you.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Javi.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Marcelo.
Hi, Javi. Hello. We lost your voice. Yeah, I can hear from the smartphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, from the smartphone I can hear you. Let me see.
Can you see my slide?
Yeah. Now you just got back to the first slide, right? You were on the number 11.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me try to put your voice from the smartphone into the microphone. Let's see if that works. Please keep talking. Please talk a little bit louder.
Hi, hello.
Yeah, we can listen to you, but
this is Robbie.
it seems like you're talking from a spaceship. It's looking funny, cool.
Maybe I am in a spaceship.
Just keep going. We are able to listen to you.
Okay, did you hear the end of my story about the diabetes patient?
No.
She used tapes, and then when you went to the guy went to her home, she used tapes, and then.
Yeah, so they were using duct tape over a button, and the duct tape basically was on the device. And the engineer said, why do you have the duct tape on your device? And the patient said, oh, it's not a big problem. I just put the tape because this button is getting pushed and it delivers the insulin, and I prevented with this tape. And the engineer said, oh my God, you should have told me that originally, but the patient just didn't see it as a problem because they had solved it with this tape. And so without observation and seeing that they do this kind of customization, you would never have even heard this was a problem from this patient. that's where looking at doing it can yield a lot of insight compared to just talking or asking questions. Then there's patient morbidity. So in the hospital, especially if there's a lot of blood or if there's a lot of infections related to a certain procedure, if there's a long recovery or a long stay in the ICU, those are other indications. If the outcomes are very poor, for example, less than 85% success rate, or if there are very expensive complications or failures, or if there's a lot of collateral damage, that also can be a sign that there's more room for improvement. And then finally, if there's really high costs, for example, if it's a very long procedures or charges are over a lot of $10,000, or it requires a lot of expensive devices or technologies, or if there's many people required, many visits, if it was a long wait time, then those can all be problems as well. Marcelo, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Are you close from Mars now?
It's like 12. Sorry?
I asked if you're close to Mars now. In your spaceship.
No, I'm back up there. That's how you can hear me. Okay, so there's more observation cues. These again are more specific examples to the hospital, but the idea is looking for triggers to help you identify opportunities for improvement and where there could be problems. So I'm not going to read through these, but you guys can look at this on your own time. Now, the observation is not the need. So an observation, as we mentioned, can lead to many need statements. And the way that we create need statements in the biodesign methodology is very, very critical. It's very important how you do this. And so the way we do it is to create a sentence that has the following structure. A way to solve a problem for a patient population or for any target population in a given setting in order to result in an outcome. So, for example, a way to monitor the fluid status of heart failure patients at home in order to prevent hospital admissions. So here you have what is the problem, monitoring the fluid status. Who is the target population, heart failure patients? Where is this being done at home? Where should prevent hospital admissions? This is the outcome that you care about. Yeah. So really what need statements do is they articulate the problem and the change in outcome that is required to satisfy the clinical dilemma. This is a really important point. So I'm up here for any questions if there are any questions.
Is there any question so far? Okay. Let's go ahead, Javi.
No question. Everything's perfectly clear. Okay, perfect. So the need statement is really the core of the innovation process. It really leads to what is the core problem being solved and why are we doing it? And I think that is what will motivate you and keep you working on a problem. Also help you define whether or not you're successful. And that's why that change in outcome is so important. So for example, what are some outcomes that that we can talk about? So for example, we can talk about improved clinical efficacy. If you're saying reduced infection, maybe it's increased survival. And so you can test this in a clinical trial. You can have increased patient safety, so maybe the actually lower rate of adverse events in clinical trials, lowering the rate of infections. You can have reduced cost. That's a pretty straightforward one. You can have improved physician facility productivity. You have improved physician ease of use. You have improved patient convenience. accelerated patient recovery. So these are all examples of what outcomes you might use as part of your need state. Preventing hospital admissions is the outcome here. Here, another outcome. One of the important things that the outcome be able to measure that as in a clinical trial. If we have reduced cost, we can measure reduced cost, right? We just have to measure how much money is spent for one option versus the standard option, the current options, so we can show a reduction in cost. How might you measure productivity? This is a question from the audience.
Audience, how do you measure productivity? Say it loud and I will repeat you. Say in Portuguese.
Just kidding.
Oh, okay. So in laboratory, we met productivity in how many exams do you do per month? Any other example? Please. Abby wants to hear you.
Se for para ser genérico, você tem que ter uma métrica e verificar se o teu operacional está atingindo essa métrica. Na prática, seria isso em qualquer área.
Yeah, they said a generic concept here. If you have an operating procedure, you have to have some metrics that will. Did you listen to that? It's in Portuguese. And you can measure it and see. Okay. Okay. So just go ahead.
Yeah, so productivity is really oftentimes about how much you can get done in a certain amount of time. So whatever your outcome is, how can you increase that for a certain time period, or reduce the amount of time it takes to complete a fixed number of. So say, for example, it took you 1 hour to do something, now it only takes you 20 minutes to do it.
Javi, may I do an intervention here? Because this time stuff is really important in microbiology. We have a joke here among the specialists, among microbiologists and infectious disease practitioners, that if you're asked 10 MD, 10 medical doctors from infectious disease specialists, what do the microbiology need to improve? 11 of them will answer, it needs to be faster. Got it there, people? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so time, So time is a really important one, and torque is required. The other thing is ease of use. So can you improve the ease of use? For example, if there's a complex workaround or a workflow that's very complicated, and you can make it, and maybe that's why people don't use a certain solution. They actually avoid it because it's too complicated. Maybe by making it easier to use, then people will want to actually use this solution or product. So how do you measure ease of use?
Audience, how do you measure ease of use?
Your information about the flux and all the process. Everyone must understand what's going to happen next.
Maybe the amount of steps it takes to get something done. So,
Are you listening to this comment, Javi?
I can't really hear it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna lend the microphone over so they can say it loud. When I say like this, can you listen to this? Not really. Okay.
I can hear you, myself.
Okay, so I'll lend the microphone to the students.
Okay.
I was saying maybe the amount of steps it takes to get something done. So maybe the fewer amount of steps, the easier it is to get something done.
Yeah, that's a good way to start. Number of steps.
please, Javi, could you repeat
you have
this?
fewer steps.
Could you repeat your last comments because the microphone was not close to the phone?
Yeah, sure. So that's a good start. That one does assume that the steps are all equal in ease of use. And so if you could show that, if you can prove that they're all equal, and then you can show that you have fewer steps, then that could be a way to show that it's easy to use. But that's pretty hard to do, that every step is equal in terms of ease of use. But if it's something like assembly, or you guys have like a furniture, if you have to assemble furniture, for example, you have instructions, and there's a lot of steps. Sometimes if there's fewer steps, it's actually more confusing and hard to understand. So I think that what is done here in the clinical setting, so in the hospital, oftentimes ease of use is done by survey. So it's not perfect, also has problems, but you basically just ask people, is it easy to use, scored on 1 to 10, for example, and then they score it, and you can ask 100 people, and then you try to show that with the new intervention, you can have a better score based on a survey. So that's one example of ease of use. But yeah, it's not easy. This is actually a really hard one, is how to improve ease of use.
We got another comment, Javi?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's not like really a comment, more like a question. You said about the survey, but the assertivity of the user in doing something is also counted on this or not. In your example of the furniture, people may say it's used to assemble, but they assemble it wrong. Does this count as easy to use if they say it's used to use?
If they do it correctly, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying they say it's easy to use, but they're not doing it correctly.
Oh, yeah, I would say that it's not easy to use. I would say it has to be, there's a perception, there's one thing that's the perception of easy to use, and then there's the reality of the outcome. In my assumption of the survey, I'm assuming 100% of the time they're getting it done correctly. But if they're not getting it done correctly, then that is also a sign that it's not easy to use as well. So that's an extreme case in some ways because it's showing that it's so difficult to use that they can't even do it. And they're even tricked into thinking it's easy. That's like the worst case scenario. So it's a good comment to understand what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve, and can people achieve it and think it's easy to use at the same time.
Javi, do you want to try to go back to your microphone? Your computer microphone?
We can try.
Yeah, maybe the problem solved. It stopped raining here in Brazil.
Is it only rain related?
Oh, okay, we can hear you. Oh.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, I just turned off the. Let me turn off the
Hello.
WhatsApp call. Lot better in your.
Okay, great.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll continue here. So for the sake of time, that improved patient convenience. That can be something like the number of times they have to go to the hospital or clinic. Can they do something in a clinic versus getting admitted to the hospital, for example? And then finally, accelerated patient recovery, which again, I think is pretty straightforward. What's the length of stay in the hospital? What's the recovery period? How many days out of work on average? So those are clear. And again, the main point is that whatever the outcome you select, it's up to you. But just make sure that it's measurable. Because for one, you want to show yourself what does it mean to be successful in trying to solve this problem. That needs to become staying measurable so that you can prove to yourself you did it, not just to yourself, but to any other people involved, whether it's the regulations that need to approve your product on Visa, or the customers. Customers will want to know how much better is your solution by what metric. And the more you quantify that, the more you can define your value proposition and that they will, customers will actually pay you for your solution or your product. So the objective outcome is a really critical part, and it's the beginning. It starts all the way at the beginning when you're thinking of the need in itself. And so I'm going to just do a quick set of slides on writing need statements. Okay, so when you write a need statement, you want to focus on the goal, not the problem. You want to avoid solutions. You want to get specific. You can experiment with a need statement by changing the venue, and you want to stay positive. Now, I'll just say my personal opinion is that there are no bad need statements. Need statements, if they are well understood and there is a need, that's a good need statement, if it really exists. But these are just tips to try to help you think differently about your need and not get too locked in. But that's okay. You know, I think if there are the examples they gave as bad, I don't think are necessarily bad. I'll tell you what I mean. So, for example, avoiding solutions. What they say here is bad is a way to track with a bathroom digital scale that communicates with your phone. So I wouldn't say it's completely bad, but it's limited to one approach. And it's very, very narrow. It's talking about a bathroom scale, talking about communicating with your phone. And it leaves you wondering why. Why you want to track your weight with a bathroom scale? What's the goal of that? A better need statement could be something like a way to keep patients aware of their daily weight to enhance compliance with dietary goals. So it identifies a specific problem, so that's the awareness of the daily weight. Patients aren't aware of it. It also has why, to help them stay on their diet. So this, as you can see, doesn't limit you to a scale actually at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be a scale. It doesn't have to be, let me take that back. It doesn't have to be a bathroom digital scale. It doesn't have to use a phone even. It could use a phone, but it doesn't have to. It could be anything. And so, again, the one above, if you want to work on a phone and you want to work on digital scale, that's not a bad need statement. If you just added the why into the need statement in order to do what outcome, that's what you'd want to add. But the one on the bottom gives you a lot more options in terms of what direction might go with that need. Another example, a way to manage diabetes. So actually, I think this is pretty a bad need statement. A way to manage diabetes. The other bad examples are like a way to cure cancer, right? It's not clear what is specifically the problem or how we're going to improve it. A better need statement is more focused and specific. A way to regularly monitor glucose in pre-diabetics in order to reduce the risk of disease progression. So it focuses on the problem, regularly monitoring glucose levels. It focuses on a population pre-diabetics, so people that are at risk of diabetes, borderline diabetes, but they don't have diabetes yet. And you're trying to reduce the risk of disease progression. So it's clear about the problem, the focus, the patient population, and a viable outcome. How would we measure an outcome like this? You guys have asked a question. Can someone tell me how would we actually measure that?
It's a question, people. Come on, guys. They're thinking about. Just a minute, Javi. They're thinking about.
Who's going to answer this?
For this time for a siesta, I know.
Maybe the more specific your need. Maybe the more specific the need is, the better, because it's a way to focus in on something that needs to get done rather than a broad spectrum of what needs to get done.
Yes. But in this example, my question is, what is the specific way to measure this outcome? So the person who wrote this need statement said, the outcome is to reduce the risk of disease progression. So how would you measure the risk of disease progression? If I were to say I had a solution and I wanted to test if I reduce the risk of disease progression, Do you guys have anyone who's here who's designed a clinical study before?
Anyone was involved in a clinical study, design of clinical study? No?
Would you design, even if you haven't done it before, just logically, how would you design a study to prove your solution reduce the risk of disease progression?
Come on, guys, you need to participate.
Everybody?
1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. We got one girl here.
You can compare the outcomes of patients who were monitored and the patients who weren't. And then you see if the ones who were monitored had a reduced risk of the disease progression, if they had a better outcome than the ones who weren't monitored.
Case control.
Yes, case control, yes.
Ideally randomized control. But yes, you want to randomize them to ones to having the current method, maybe there's no monitoring, or your new solution, and then you monitor the disease progression. Over how much time would you have to monitor
As long as the study goes.
it?
10 years, 12.
As you can see, what is disease progression? So not all the answers are here, but it gives you a starting point to understand that. Because obviously we can't do a 10-year study, or we could, but it's going to take much too long to find out if this.
So we can use the data, the knowledge that was produced before, to compare with this new solution. That could be a way.
That's true. You can do a historical control. So look at existing data and then compare it to the new solution. It's not as powerful as a randomized control study because those variables could be different. The patient population could be different. The criteria for enrolling in the study could be different. So the most powerful method is always a randomized controlled study because you have an active comparison in the study. But it is much more efficient sometimes if you can compare to historical. You might start out that way to see if you're close. To see if you even are close, you might start out with a historical comparison. Once that looks very promising, then you do a randomized control. But anyways, that gives you guys an idea of what some of the issues are around measuring outcomes. So another need statement example is about changing menus. So a way to diagnose potential arrhythmias without the need for technician input. Does everyone know what an arrhythmia is? Can someone define that in the audience?
Who's able to define arrhythmia?
It's like a heart thing, but I don't know exactly.
It's like a heart thing, someone's saying here.
It's a heart thing.
That's absolutely correct.
It's a heart thing.
There's a heart. When your heart rhythm is irregular for some reason or another, there's a lot of different types, but it's a bad heart rhythm. And so a way to diagnose potential arrhythmias without need for technician input. So its specific goal is called out, it's focused on the problem, it need for additional resources, the technician. And its brainstorming is focused on diagnostic processes. So a different need statement is something like a way to continuously monitor EKG at home to instantaneously identify arrhythmias. It changes the menu to the home. It gives greater possible gains by being at home specifically. It may enable new concepts and ideas based on the environment. So consider doing something from in the hospital to in the clinic or in a clinic setting or from the doctor's office to your house. Now I did change this here from a solution. This is now solution oriented. It's monitoring EKG versus diagnosing potential arrhythmias. So we're limiting ourselves to EKG. EKG is a technology using sensors to monitor heart rhythms. So because you can actually diagnose arrhythmias other ways, but we're limiting ourselves here to EKG. So again, I don't think there's bad need statements, but different need statements will bring out different details. Because one of the functions of the need statement is to basically launch you into your next phase, which is concept generation. How to come up with actual solutions. And sometimes the way the need statement is phrased and constructed will affect how you develop your solutions and how you come up with your brainstorm. So I'll give you some examples in a couple slides. So a last example here is to stay positive. So here's an example that's a little bit related to AMR, is a way to not have infections related to dialysis catheters. It's negative, it focuses on one specific issue of one solution. A positive need statement would be a way to provide long-term high-flow vascular access for hemodialysis. And so it's changing the infections it's covering the fact that infections cause the dialysis catheter to shut down. So by having a long-term high-flow access, you're implying that you don't want infections, but you're also implying other functional attributes that aren't covered when I just talk about infections. So by flipping it to something positive, it's focused on the goal of the dialysis, and it's not limiting itself. So,
Javi, we cannot listen to you.
Oh.
Your voice is gone again.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Are you there, Javi?
Yes, hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
We cannot listen to you. Your microphone went off suddenly.
No, but let me try something. Hello?
Javi?
Can you hear me?
Can you listen to us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
We still don't have your voice. Oh, that horse thing. We didn't.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello.
No.
Hello.
Not even a sound.
Okay. Do you want to try WhatsApp?
Yeah. Let's go back to WhatsApp. Yes, at WhatsApp I can. Okay, just a minute. I'm turning the microphone on. Yeah, we missed the last few words in your previous slide. Just a minute. We don't have the microphone. Let me see.
Okay, let's try it now. Just a minute. Now, yes, you can go.
Hello. Okay, great. Let me turn down the volume here. Okay, so I was just saying on this slide, this isn't necessarily bad, even though we say bad here. It's just focus on the negative part in one specific area. But by making it positive, you focus on the functional outcome that you care about in terms of hemodialysis. I'm not going to get into dialysis, but you guys can get thinking about this. But what's the goal of the horse? What's the horse trying to accomplish? It's really about transportation. The horse is trying to transport you from A to B. And so if we've changed the needs to be a way to transport people quickly and reliably, it's focusing on the problem, not the solution. The horse is the solution to the transportation problem. You're trying to transport people. You don't really need a horse. Now, let me now disagree with myself. So, if you are a horse breeder or you own a horse stable, you might want to focus on a horse. It might be okay for you because that's what you do. You're a horse expert. And so the horse need statement is focused on horses. But the thing is, if your business relies on horses and someone invents the automobile, your horse business is going to go out of business. And so the idea here is that you're able to help create the new innovations and not be stuck in the past. And that's part of the process that we're talking about here.
Javi,
Here's another, yeah.
can you go back to your horse slide? I love that one. Okay, so can we say that here we're kind of, not exactly, but we're comparing incremental innovation in the first example and disruptive innovation in the second one. And what?
Absolutely, that's exactly right.
Okay, so what we want here is disruptive innovation. And I know it's harder to get to that. New molecule or a new fast, cheap, and easy to do diagnostic of antimicrobial resistant bacteria, just to give some examples. But we don't want the students, the fellows, to lose their mind in the disruptive innovation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I keep saying that these aren't bad need statements. It just depends on what your focus is and what you want to work on, and also what's achievable. Back then in 1800, it was probably easier to work on a better horse or maybe a better carriage, a better horse-drawn carriage. It was probably on an automobile at that time. And so there's probably a lot of benefits to working on horses. And I think that if we were to focus only on valuable incremental innovation, that is very achievable. And so it's up to the teams to decide how they want to focus their energy and what types of projects they want to work on. But I think both are valuable and they both have a place in the program in terms of incremental innovation versus disruptive innovation. So that's my comment, Marcelo. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I want to add another comment, another point of view, just to make the discussion point here. Recently in Brazil, I don't know if you heard about, we have this truck drivers strike. They just shut down the country. It was true. We didn't have gas. I could not go to work. I was allowed to stay at home. We didn't have school classes here at the university for 3 days. And there was this huge drop down on the GDP at the country. So if we're talking about needs finding, we cannot stay thinking about trucks or how to pay higher salaries or how to pay better the truck drivers. We need to think about other ways to do transportation. So this is a really recent example of macroeconomy. We're not going to solve this at this hiPUC, not this year at least. But it's a very, very good example. The way we change our minds when we do an innovation program. And I kept saying, why? Why in Brazil do they don't have a stronger or a much more broader transportation system? And then it comes up to the power of this business. The companies that sells the truck, the companies that construct the road, the highways, and the tire companies, they are just too big, and they have an enormous impact in Brazilian economy. So this is the kind of macroeconomy thought that you must have, we must have.
That's definitely an important point, Marcelo, especially when it comes to stakeholder analysis. So when you focus in on a need, we're going to talk about all the different stakeholders that are involved in that need and the impacts they have on the need. And so understanding the political stakeholders, the business stakeholders, the users, who are the customers, the users, they're all critical parts of the innovation, and understanding their motivations and their incentives is a pretty important part. I'll leave that there unless there's any other comments. Okay. So here's another series of examples. A way to minimize glasses frames in order to maintain the natural beauty of the face. And so on the right here we have frameless glasses so that you don't get blocking the beauty of the person's face. But as you can see, I'm really still I'm minimizing the glasses frames. I'm not getting rid of the glasses frames. What's the goal of glasses? So the one way is a way to restore 20/20 vision to maintain the natural beauty of the face. If I have a broader need statement, then I might consider solutions that don't even include glasses. I'm just trying to restore vision. So how do you restore vision in other ways? And that can maybe lead you to a different brainstorm solution. And then by adding one word, I added the word permanently here. That just might trigger you to think about this in a totally different way. A way to permanently restore 20/20 vision. So that comes to ways of actually surgically restoring it. And that opens up a new area of innovation and thinking about solutions. So again, this is just examples of ways that need statements might lead you to different solution sets. And that's the main point of this whole lecture, is just to get you to understand that the way you phrase the need statement is really important. And again, because it's, as we showed you, different ways of doing a need statement can lead to different solutions. We recommend doing it not just twice, really do it many times. So for example, a parent, here's a quick observation. Parent has an 18-month-old child with ear pain and can't decide whether it's worth to make the long journey to the hospital to get treatment. When they called the nurse on the phone, the nurse said to wait 48 hours before seeking treatment. So we could have a couple here. A way to diagnose ear infections at home so she could know if it was worth going to the hospital. A way to manage the child's ear pain at home while waiting for 48 hours. So here we don't even know if we still have to go, but we make the pain for the child less. Versus the first need statement, I'm actually diagnosing the ear infection. I'm not affecting the pain at all. So again, two very different need statements, all sum from the same observation. And so we're changing the venue, changing the target, changing the perspective. One is diagnosing the ear infections. The parent here is mainly doing this. The way to manage the child's ear pain, again, is focus on the child's pain. And so we're changing our assumptions around what's important as well. So again, observations, a single observation can lead to many needs. And so I'm going to have you guys do this now in your teams. I don't know, are you all sitting by teams already?
Well, if they're not, they can do this quickly. Just sit around by each other's teammates. Okay, they're doing this now.
Okay, so move into your teams, and I want you in the next, I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes. Okay, that's kind of a long time, but I'm going to give you guys 10 whole minutes. So we'll say by 11, sorry, what is the time there now?
3:08 in Brazil, right?
So we'll say by 3:19, okay?
Okay.
I want you guys to email me 2 need statements to this email address in the next 10 minutes. so every team can have 2 need statements. If you have more, that's okay too, but at least 2 need statements. And send it to me in the next 10 minutes.
And Javi, can we focus on the antimicrobial resistance? Are you meaning about this, exactly this case, right?
This is a specific case right here, yep.
Great, great, got it. So starting now.
Starting now, and if you have any questions, I'm here on the phone. Otherwise, I'm gonna step away for a few minutes. So I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll call you back in 10 minutes then.
Okay, well, call me back in 10 minutes. Perfect.
Perfect, all right.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Do it, boys, do it, girls. 10 minutes to go. It always started a way to do something, to reach out something in order to...
No.
Oh, please don't turn it on. Eu tenho a apresentação aqui também, se cair. Pessoal, vamos lá. Vocês têm que escrever 2 need statements em cada grupo. Ah, vocês estão lendo ainda? Vocês estão sabendo de cabeça. Veio da Índia, tal, uma lesão, uma osteomielite, tal, infecção por multiresistência. É legal. Já se foram 2 minutos, hein? The need statement needs to be in English for sure. Otherwise, Javi won't understand anything. Come on, green team, come on, blue team, come on, purple team. Right? Não é para salvar ela, é um problema. Vocês observaram um problema. O que vocês vão fazer para isso não acontecer mais 1, 2, 10, 50 vezes? Não pense só nela. Pense no problema. Isso é um problema que pode ocorrer inúmeras vezes. Então pense em resolver, não em resolver. Pense em fazer um mix aí, pegar uma solução. Pense no problema que é You don't need to think about saving the station. You need to think about the problem, not the solution. We always want to think in the solution. Você já está dando solução. Não é solução. Você tem que pensar no problema. Don't think about solutions. Think about the problem. What is the problem here? Então, mas dentro da metodologia, se você coloca a solução, você passa para o problema. É difícil. É uma das coisas mais difíceis para nós. Mas ele já passou por você já sabe. Five minutes to go.
Não, mas daí, tipo, ela. Não, mas daí, tipo, eu acho que. Mas não, eu acho que o problema foi ela.
Eu quero ver o que tá saindo. Tá acabando o tempo.
Não foi tomando antibiótico.
Não, 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 não. One of the problems that health system doesn't give a local patient. Você tá falando
Não,
você
e
não vai
subsequent
falar do problema.
osteomyelitis.
Você vai fazer um need statement baseado em problemas. Então, a way to keep a history track of the patient in order to. Não, você está falando uma maneira de obter. Só que você está funilando. Tem que manter o histórico do paciente. Você já está colocando. A venue está bem estreita, mas é um mito. Você pode melhorar nisso. Don't try to write down a perfect need statement at the first time. You won't be able to do this. Escrevam o que vocês puderem. Não uma solução. Não uma solução. In order to increase survivor, decrease antimicrobial. In order to. Sempre tem que terminar in order to. Qual que é o seu objetivo? Qual que é o teu outcome? O outcome, não pelo.
As you in order to reduce the risk of.
Tem um jeito de fazer uma coisa para alguém da objetivo. A way to some this population in order to reduce mortality, reduce antimicrobial resistance.
Osteomyelitis. Tá, aí aqui a gente podia ter, in order to more accurately diagnose
Mais narrow. Você pode ser mais broad. In order to reduce the risk of infection. General. Nossa, a gente não tem acho que vai acabar.
Ai, just think about it. Which straight up, I'll like. In order to more accurate. A more accurate and faster. And effective and accurate.
Javi's complaining that he hasn't got any email.
I just sent it.
Did you get one? The first one?
Just sent it.
Just got one. The first one. There's only 6 left. 6 other teams. Come on, guys. Come on. Time's money. Time's money. Do you prefer to start discussing the first one or receive all the others first? All of them. Right. The green team is starting first. Come on, guys. Emails. Stop talking and send the emails.
The one that isn't identified is ours, the right team, because we forgot to identify our emails.
Oh, you forgot. The red team just sent you an email and didn't identify who they were.
Yes.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, he doesn't want to have the teams, just the examples. We're not ranking you, not yet. It's not so far, not so early, Julia. Okay, your screen is on our screen. So I think we need a few more minutes. Let me just put like this. I'll give one last minute. And if they don't send it, they are out of the competition.
I'm gonna get feedback on all of these needs statements by tomorrow.
Oh, you're gonna make comments on them.
Yeah, but I'm gonna just take one or two. I'm just gonna take 1 or 2 examples, so we can keep going, Marcelo, in the interest of time.
Okay.
I can just take 1 of these examples.
Do you want to try to go back to your PC microphone, to your laptop microphone, if it's?
Sure.
Let's see. It's muted on your Skype business. Have you checked it out? It's muted. At least in our screen. Oh, now there you go. Please keep
Can you
talking.
hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. I'm gonna turn off WhatsApp because it's a lot better in the
Okay.
in the laptop. Okay, just go ahead. Oh, your screen is out now. You're presenting.
Marcelo.
Now we can hear you.
Marcelo, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Oh, here are slides back now also.
Okay, it's a little choppy.
There you go. Are you talking to us?
Oh, purple team.
Your voice is not coming in. Now your voice is back. Guys, did all the groups send the email? Tem que mandar no 3G, no 4G do celular. Abre a mão aí dentro. Now we can see you and we can't hear you.
Recebe sinal de áudio dele lá, porque ele tá editando lá, mas.
Hello? Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Now we can hear both. It's funny.
Okay.
Now we can hear the WhatsApp and we can hear in the laptop.
Okay, perfect. So should we do the one?
Yeah, keep on talking on the laptop because the sound is better. But we cannot see your screen anymore.
How about now?
Not yet.
Oh, weird. It stopped.
Yeah.
Bum.
I can try to. Oh, it's loading. So loading now. We should keep WhatsApp on because when WhatsApp is on, we can hear you. Oh, your screen. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Your screen is coming back now.
Yeah, we should, yeah, I think, let's see, I have teams, so, oh no, I have 4 teams. Oh no, I have 5 teams now.
5 teams only. There are 1 team missing. Did everybody send the email? There's 1 team. Oh, there's the red, the orange team. The orange is getting hot and didn't change the email. Come on, orange team. Come on, come on.
Can you see my screen?
Are you talking to us, Tommy?
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. You're texting.
Oh, because I only have about half an hour.
Let's what? I'm sorry?
Let's get going because I only have half an hour.
Okay. Great. People, come on. Let's get going here. Please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ready? Okay, guys. Good job. This is a hard problem to do this, and it's very counterintuitive, especially for engineers and scientists. I think they tend to want to include solutions in their need statements. And so I'm going to go through these very quickly. I'm not going to have time for discussion, comments, but I'll send you guys back my more detailed comments in an email to give you guys some feedback. But I'm going to go through, these are the ones that I have so far. I think if there's any remaining ones, send them to me, and I'll give you guys feedback by email. So the first ones here, a way to track diseases internationally in order to get an early and accurate diagnosis. So this needs statement, I think, is pretty good. I don't know what it means to track diseases internationally, so we'd have to dig into what that means exactly. In order to get early accurate diagnosis. So I suppose the problem here was identifying the resistant bacteria internationally. So we'd have to unpack sort of why this matters, why this would affect the treatment pathway, and what it would mean to be tracked internationally, and how that would affect the outcomes. So let's think about that one. A way to avoid osteomyelitis post-bone fractures in elderly patients in order to reduce the risk of infection. Okay, this is a pretty clear one. It has a very clear problem, avoiding osteomyelitis post-bone fractures in elderly patients. That's really excellent, really well defined here. Well-defined patient population, well-defined scenario, post-bone fracture, and avoiding osteomyelitis in order to reduce the risk of infection. So infection, I'm confused. I don't know enough about osteomyelitis to know if, is this sort of redundant? My only question is the risk of infection also avoiding osteomyelitis? Is osteomyelitis caused by an infection? I guess is my question. So I'll just make sure that maybe the outcome here should be more specific to antibiotic-resistant infections.
No, that's what they say first, and I said they were narrowing.
Well, isn't
I
osteomyelitis
changed
a
their
type of
mind.
infection?
I conduct them to the abyss, and then they jump in it.
Well, what is, I guess what I need to, not being an expert here, let me just look it up. Osteomyelitis.
Well, osteomyelitis is infection of the bone, so it is redundant. The group already agreed it is redundant, right?
Well, inflammation caused by an infection, yeah. So I would either think about this or think about what else you're trying to achieve here by avoiding osteomyelitis or by avoiding infection. Are you trying to improve reduce hospitalizations, reduce the risk of antibiotic-resistant bacteria infections, improve survival, because that patient died. But this is where also, like, as you start to put these need statements together, additional research becomes necessary. So you can see, what is the rate of osteomyelitis? Is it a very high rate? Does it cause, what are the main problems it causes as related to the observation that we had in that one patient? And so thinking about the measurable outcome here will help you guys kind of narrow down what is the most important thing that is a result of osteomyelitis.
Javi, just really quickly, we as a group would like to tell you that our original needs statement was a way to avoid osteomyelitis post-bone fractures in elderly patients in order to reduce the risk of antimicrobial resistance, but the professor made us change it.
We blame Pilanetto on this one. That's okay. Marcelo, we'll have a talk later.
All right.
So the next group had these next need statements. So a way to keep the patient history, a global one. So I think the need here is about having the Indian, so they had some issues in India, and then they came to the US, they continue to have problems related to what happened in India. So having kind of a global patient history there. So I think the wording here can be refined, but I think I understand what the goal is here. And also I think, as you guys do more research understanding what the problems are, you can see, I think the next analysis, especially when we talk about records and documentation, and there's some more here that have to do with records and documentation, is what is the outcome? What would be the measurable outcome of having that record? And how can we then show that its success was a successful need to implement that? And that'll help to understand what would be the value of having that. So what would be the value of having a global patient record? And then, it's also it's kind of specific to, although you say history here as opposed to a record. So I guess it isn't limiting itself to a solution just yet. But as we start to think about later on, we'll talk about more about business models and implementation and challenges there. and I think that will help understand how this need would result in potential challenges and maybe ways to solve those challenges. But anyway, I think this is an interesting one, and also interesting to think about if they had that information. If they, the two questions that come up is, did they know they had a resistant antibiotic infection in India? I don't know if they knew that based on the case. Maybe I misread the case. They only knew that she had hospitalizations in India and osteomyelitis. And when she presented in the US, she probably already had that history shared. Otherwise, they wouldn't know this in the article. So the question is, would the information have changed anything? And when would it have changed anything? And I think that could be something we could dig into to understand. Maybe we could make this more specific. Because right now it's pretty broad and it's a little vague in terms of the way the need statement is. Anyway, okay, so the next one, a way to kill the specific bacteria strain. So that's a I think a clear one. I would again work on the phrasing here to be more specific, but basically a new way to treat this type of resistant bacteria strain. And again, you can define an outcome here, to reduce mortality, so reduce the number of deaths associated with this type of infection. It could be reducing the time of hospitalization time, whatever we think is the most important outcome. But I would add an outcome for that one as well. And then a way to reduce bacterial resistance. So I think this is obviously an important need, but like some of the examples we had earlier, it's a little bit broad. And I think that's okay if this could be like, and I think the way to think about it is the broader the need, the more of a science project it is, okay? The more specific the need, the more of a business or engineering or incremental innovation it is too. So like, for example, as Marcelo was saying, this could be really disruptive innovation by focusing so broadly. But it's hard to think about ways to actually make this happen in the next 6 weeks, or how much time you guys have. Not that that's not a reason not to work on it. This, for example, could be a Nobel Prize-winning research in a lab, but it might take 10 years of research or more, 20 years to reduce bacterial resistance. It's a huge problem, and it's a huge area to work on. But is there something more specific about the need statement that would make it more practicable? And again, I think it depends. I'm not espousing one philosophy over another. I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone what are the trade-offs between one approach versus another approach, and that you guys make those decisions with full awareness. Okay, enough on that. The next examples are a way to unify health records in order to treat the patient in full. And I'll just go to the next one here. A way to universalize patient communication in order to make the treatment consistent and efficient. So I think there are some assumptions here based on the fact that, again, it goes back to the records that prevented the treatment of the patient to be treated effectively. So we have to validate that better records or more unified records would have aided the patient. I'm not 100% sure, just based on the case, that if they had better documentation, that they would have treated the patient more effectively. I think there's a chance that the patient would have presented with that resistant bacteria, and then had these problems anyway, and then we wouldn't have had a solution anyway, even if we had the records on hand. I'm also guessing that because the patient came back home to the US and left the hospital in India, they weren't feeling that badly. And maybe, I'm guessing actually that they probably didn't know in India that she had this infection. This is, again, an assumption, and we don't know. So those would be questions we need to follow up with. We need to ask experts to get more information. Because if she didn't know she had the infection in India, then having better records might not have improved the outcome. It would not have made the treatment consistent and more efficient. Because I'm not sure the patient communication part here, we'd have to again explore this to understand how that would be effective in improving the treatment.
Javi,
Yeah,
may I make a specialist comment?
absolutely.
KPC, which is the bacteria in the case, the mold-resistant bacteria, it's been known since 2006 in US, and it's been epidemic since the 2010 in Brazil, probably in India as well. So what the story tell us, the case tell us, it's about how to monitor mold-resistant bacteria from people that are traveling abroad.
Yes, yes.
So I'm just giving this comment so they can rethink about their need statement in the next few hours. Once you leave, we will keep working in improvement of this need statement. Is that a good idea? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be good if you, especially for some of these, before maybe you can send me by the end of the session today with Marcelo. You can help work with the teams on revising need statements and sending any changes, and then I can provide any additional. I can also get other feedback from the other team members here, and we can provide feedback. If you guys have that time, I think what you said, Marcelo, makes a lot of sense, and it already provides some more specificity about the monitoring patients. And we talked, it's sort of talked about here, but it's best to be very specific. So a way to monitor patients that are at risk of disease but then again, I think what we need to think about, Marcelo, here is the outcome. Is the outcome then, to prevent transmission of the disease so that they would then be
international transmission of the disease, I guess.
We have to think about what the right outcomes are, and there are a few different options we could talk about, but because monitoring by itself might not help the patient that has the current infection, but it might help to reduce the risk of spreading the disease, right? So, and that's what they talk. That's why I included these sentences here at the bottom. And the article is actually here, the original article that I copied this case from. But I add these things about surveillance and surveys because that is going to be a critical part. We talk about antimicrobial resistance, and they're not necessarily patient-specific outcomes, but they are system-level outcomes. So we can talk about how to improve the system or the overall outcomes related to a patient population as opposed to the specific patient. So it's a good point. So I'm going to just quickly go through these other ones. A way to detect resistant genes faster for reducing the time of diagnosis in hospitalized patients. So inherent in this need statement is that speed really mattered. And I don't know if that was true. I don't know if they had diagnosed faster, would that, because here it's a little bit redundant too. It says a way to detect genes faster to reduce the time of diagnosis. So you are reducing the time, but what's the outcome? Are we do we think reducing the time will help with the treatment? Probably not the treatment, but it might help with reducing the spread of infection. So going back to my conversation with Marcelo, maybe it would help reduce the spread. But I didn't have any indication that there was a long delay, except for the fact that they had to send it to the CDC. So there's we can do some more research in understanding what are the risks of, the patient was already on a no contact protocol. They're already in a room with, what do they call it? The patient was already, or maybe I removed that sentence actually. If you go to the article, the patient was already in a no contact room she was at risk of having this type of very, very resistant microbial infection. So we can unpack some of those issues around contact and spreading the disease. Way to reduce hospitalization time to prevent infection risk in patient. This is a really good one. It's a little bit broad, so we might go specific. Here we talk about bone fractures and osteomyelitis. So we might say a way to reduce hospitalization time post-bone fracture to prevent infection risk in patients. And we might want to focus on a setting. So we could say in India, for example, that gives us some resource constraints, given that the Indian environment, healthcare environment, is a lot different than in the US, for example. Or if you guys want to take it to Brazil, you could research about Brazil, and we could focus on Brazil and the specifics to the Brazilian healthcare environment. But I would say this is very clear. Reducing hospitalization, prevent infection risk in patients. We might want to validate how much the hospitalization time affects prevent infection risk. I think that is absolutely true, but we can validate that in the research. Is there someone that's done a study to show that the more time you're in the hospital, you're at higher risk of infection? What is that quantification? And that will help give us a more quantifiable target for reduction. And then here, a new and faster way to identify the susceptibility of microorganisms infecting patients in order to optimize the treatment. So again, I think we'd have to understand in this specific case, would that have helped, given that there were no really good treatments? Maybe there were treatments that beyond the antibiotics that could have helped. I don't know, but we'd want to research that optimization, because this is a good one in general for other types of microbial infections. But when we're talking about the specific case of CRE, then it might not be as clear that that could actually have helped. A new treatment in order to combat pad-resistant bacteria to the classic treatment with antibiotics. So again, I think this is a pretty big need. It's specific, more specific than this one, a way to reduce bacterial resistance. Here we're talking about a new treatment to combat pan-resistant bacteria instead of antibiotics. So we're kind of isolating antibiotics as not the solution. We're focusing on the combating pan-resistant bacteria. We could add a clinical outcome here, like in order to reduce or in order to improve survival or improve some other kind of clinical outcome. But I think this is a hard need, but a pretty well defined one. So I'll come up with some more specific comments. If you guys do have any changes or revisions you'd like to make, send it to me by, let's say, by tonight sometime. I'm not going to look at them until tomorrow probably. So send me some comments, and then or let's say by around 8 p.m. tonight, Pacific time. So by midnight your time, you can send me any comments or changes, or ideally before then, and I'll take a look at them around that time to provide any kind of feedback. So unfortunately, we don't have time for more discussion. This is a really hard methodology to get down and become comfortable with. It takes time. It takes practice. So I recommend keeping at it, keep practicing. Even in a simple need like this, I should say simple, but even in a single case like this, you guys can see there's so many different ways of looking at this need. Whether it's better treatment for that disease, which can be hard, but I think there's a very valid, huge need. There's a better way to treat these infections. Really a really good need. Or a way to prevent infections, which I think is a totally different need, but again, relevant here. Preventing the infection, a way to monitor the infections. Again, very different need, but also really, really important here. So just from taking a single case, we can extract many different needs statements. Okay, so I've got about 10 minutes, but I've got a bunch of slides I want to go through with you guys in the next 10 minutes. And they're going to help you with your final deliverable in 2 weeks. So what we're going to have you guys do is, next we're going to talk about need scoping. So need scoping, some research is helpful when you guys do need scoping. So we talked about the need here, and we have a problem, we have a population, we have an outcome. So in terms of the foundation for need scoping, these are the elements of the need specification. We have the fundamentals, and we call it disease state fundamentals, But if it's not specific to a disease, it could be sort of the fundamentals of the problem. What are the statistics around the problem? How many people does it affect? How bad is it? What are the different types of diseases or problems? Like how does the problem work? How does the mechanism of action work? This is what the fundamentals are. The existing solutions, what are the current competitive solutions that exist in the market? And there are always existing solutions. They may not work very well, but there is always some people trying to solve this currently somehow. So understanding what those are and what the shortcomings are and what the advantages are is helpful. Stakeholder analysis. So again, like I mentioned before, this is about who is impacted by the problem. What are their incentives? What are, who are all the different roles that are being played in terms of this issue? And then we talk about market analysis. How big of a problem is it? What's the economic impact? What would people be willing to pay to solve the problem? So these are all part of the need statement. So scoping a need is a part of what we did. Is basically taking a need statement, exploring and challenging components of the need statement related to that. So here's some questions you can ask yourself. Does the core issue for a problem, does the core issue require a better definition? Or are there adjacencies that should be explored? For the population, does the target audience require segmentation? For example, if we said we wanted to prevent osteomyelitis in post-bone fracture patients, do we actually need to segment that? Is it patients who have specifically hip fractures? Is it patients with a certain type of fracture? Is it, and you guys actually did this already, they talked about elderly patients. So you're segmenting it versus just any bone fracture, it's bone fractures in the elderly. So we can get more specific populations. In terms of outcome, does the desired result require clarification? Is it meaningful or important to the target population? And can the outcome be measured? These are really three good questions here on the outcome measure. So a need statement scoping up and down. So this is a medical need, but basically the more narrow is on top versus the broader on the bottom. For example, the broad one might be a way to prevent antibiotic resistance on the bottom. But the more specific thing might be a way to prevent specific type of infection in a specific type of patients, in order to do a certain type of outcome. So you can see kind of the range of scoping and how that might be helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to go broad to give you guys an idea of what are the different elements of the problem you're looking at before you go back down to becoming specific and narrow. So here's an example. Diabetic foot ulcers in diabetic patients with lower limb ischemia to reduce the incidence of lower limb amputations. So that's basically healing the foot ulcer. So this is, again, this actually isn't about specificity. This is about the progression. So this one at the top is at the end. They've already got the foot ulcer. Now you're trying to heal it. This is like in the infection case. They already got the infection. Now we're trying to treat the infection. A way to improve perfusion in extremities in diabetic patients with lower limb ischemia. So this is improving the blood flow to prevent reduce the incidence of lower limb amputations. And here, so this would be like trying to prevent the infection, right? Trying to prevent the osteomyelitis infection, or whatever the infection is from happening. Now here at the bottom is the earliest one, a way to prevent diabetes in pre-diabetic individuals. So we know that these foot ulcers are caused by diabetes, so why not prevent diabetes? This is pretty broad. But this one would be sort of like a way to prevent the bone fractures, right, in general, so that the patients don't end up in the hospital. That would be the analogy to the need statement we had earlier. So you can see here we scoped it in two different ways. One was sort of specific to broad. Here it's sort of in the progression of the disease, from the diabetes to the foot ulcers, all the way to the low, the perfusion loss as a result of diabetes, and then so this is like the vascular disease that results from diabetes, and then healing the foot ulcer after it's already happened, after the fact. So again, this is just another way to look at it. Think of it like a tree. You have the trunk of the tree, and then you can go all the way out to the branches to figure out where you are in the needs. Because if we talked about, in this example, if we have diabetic foot ulcers, if you focus on this need, and then someone cures diabetes or figures out a way to prevent diabetes, then your need's not going to become that important anymore. That being said, what's the chance of someone curing diabetes? It's very low. So it's sort of inversely related to the feasibility. Usually, not always, but usually, the broader your need and the earlier stage your need, the more disruptive and the harder and the more of a, we call it also blue sky, because I've heard that before. Basically, the riskier the need is to work on. Versus if you get more specific, it might be very focused and it might be a smaller market, but your chances of success go up because you've focused down on a specific area. So need scoping is essential to determine the best opportunity, and the scoping process requires validation. So, we came up with a bunch of needs. A lot of that can be validated by some research, and also just better defined as you guys do some, research and reading around the topic. But it stems from that observation. I think that's the important thing, is that it's a value. It's a real need because you saw it, or we saw it in a real case. And now in this case, we didn't actually see it, but we know it really happened. So the next few slides are about need research. I'm not going to go into detail here for the sake of time, but you guys will get a copy of these slides. And you guys can then use it to research, what are the different parts of the condition. And here's some questions, that we want you guys to look at when we talk about the relevant conditions. Here again, some sources of where you can find information on these conditions. Again, this is somewhat geared towards medical stuff, but it's very relevant to non-medical things as well. Some more sources for disease states. Understanding existing solutions. So what are you trying to answer? Well, what are the existing solutions? What are the strengths and weaknesses? What seems to be missing? So again, some resources here that we can share with you guys. A lot of times what we found in previous programs is that it's hard to find Brazil-specific data. Sometimes, the data is more in the US or in Europe. And so I think that's okay, but it's always best, since you guys you're focused on the Brazilian environment and the Brazil, that we can find Brazilian data. It's always the most powerful and the most compelling. Then identifying the relevant stakeholders. So here's just an example of some stakeholders that might be existing for a medical need. And there's a lot of different stakeholders, and you want to know what is valued by the decision makers. So who's the decision maker when it comes to a treatment? Is it the doctor? Is it the patient? Is it the patient's family? In the case of other instances, is it a government worker? Is it an employee of a system? Who's making the decisions, and what are their interests? Are they aligned or not? So is the doctor's alignment in line with, for example, the insurance? For in the case, the healthcare insurance might have a different opinion. They might want to not spend any money, but the doctor might want the most expensive treatment for their patient. And so you have to understand if these are aligned or not aligned, and what are the effects of that in terms of the solution for the needs statement. This is a really important point. And then finally, the market. So how much of an improvement will new technology have to offer compared to existing solutions to motivate change in behavior? Is a sustainable business possible based on the size of the market in the need area? So this can be, what's the market landscape? What's the segments of the market? Who are the different, and we can talk about market segmentation in more detail. It's really important to understand what the different segments are. And then what's your target market? Who are you going to focus on? And how big is that market? So market sources include going to professional societies, talking to patients, websites. We can share more information here. And so varying your data sources and validating your assumptions is really important. For example, a problem in the community, for example, you have this need, a way to reduce a problem for patients that improves an outcome. This is your observation. Then you go to the literature. Oh, this problem occurs in the community clinic 60% of the time. And then you talk to experts and you say, they see the problem happen 1 to 2 times per year. So this could affect how you focus. Maybe you focus on community clinics and not on research hospitals. So then you have to go and find clinical feedback from the community clinics instead of at the research hospital. So this is a problem that happens at Stanford a lot, because at Stanford, it's a very, very specialized hospital. You don't get a lot of common problems that you see in the community hospitals. And you think, it's very common differentiation between private hospitals and public hospitals here in the US as well. So one note here, we're doing all this research, and it's a lot of work, but we haven't come up with a solution yet this whole time. And this is a really important point. You're just focused on the need statement. And you're trying to build a case for this need statement. Because the whole idea here is that while you can jump to a solution and start working on it, you want to really make sure that you're working on a good, validated need, and that the need is really well defined. And so that, for one, it makes sure that when you come up with a solution, it really solves the need in a really, you're really coming up with the right solution. But then secondly, you want to just make sure that you're working on a valuable need. This is going to take, if you end up working on this project, whatever it might become, it could take months or years, most likely years, for you to develop a solution, really test it, and really develop a business case or whatever the research project ends up becoming. It takes a long time for anything to work, to become real, and to become feasible, and that you can actually implement it. And so before you invest that time and effort, you want to really understand, is this need valuable? Is this need the need that I think it is? Or is there something about it that would change the way we work on it? Are there solutions coming up in the pipeline that would affect the need, that would make it not worth me working on this specific need? A good example is like if you see people already coming up with antibiotic-resistant treatments that use new mechanisms where it's harder for the bacteria to become resistant. Does that make certain other needs less valuable over time? What's the risks? What are the chances of those being successful over time or not? And what's the timeline for those becoming successful versus what you're working on? And so understanding what else is out there, how big this need is and how important it is, I think will help you make sure that you're working on something valuable and also become motivating for you to keep working on it when times will be tough. Because times will be tough when you're working on any solution on your own. And you have to be motivated by the need to push through any challenges that you face over time to make sure that it's successful. So I'll kind of leave it there. Let me see, there's a couple more notes here. We talked a little about need filtering, which we can kind of get to more in the next session. But basically the need filtering is that you have a bunch of needs, but which of those needs is really the most important ones? We're going to ask you guys to generate a long list of needs, but we want you to then prioritize them and highlight which ones are the ones that you want to work on. So we can talk about these things over here, what are the typical ways to filter needs? But I like to simplify it for the purposes of making a ranking criteria. Usually use 2 or 3 criteria. One is the severity of the need. Is it life-threatening, or is it just inconvenient? Then the frequency of the need. If it's a need that is recurring or lifelong, think about the prevalence of the need. So that's basically how many people have this problem today, or how common is the problem today. If it occurs once in a patient's life, think incidence. So how many times does this happen per year is incidence. We can talk more about this if you guys have questions. And then what's the economic impact? Usually this is related to the above. So often I ignore this at this early stage when I'm just thinking of needs and trying to filter and rank them. And what else? You guys can honestly, as a team, you want to prioritize what's important to you. So maybe you have other factors that are important for you as a team and based on your backgrounds and expertise, and you want to incorporate that. For example, does the need involve certain type of technology or research that you're an expert in, so that you want to bring to your project? And that would help filter your need towards something that otherwise you might not work on, or someone else wouldn't work on, but you want to work on it because of your background. So here's just a very basic example, a way to cure pancreatic cancer. Severity of pancreatic cancer is very high. So if we score this from 1 to 5, 5 being the most severe, I would score it as a 5. It's deadly. Pancreatic cancer kills people very quickly. What's the frequency of pancreatic cancer? It's actually quite low. It's not that common. So as I multiply that through, I'd get a score of 5. Now, if I did a way to cure the common cold, what's the severity of the common cold? That's not that high. It's usually pretty benign, but in some cases it might become bad for older patients, for example. So maybe I give it a 2. Common cold is happens to most people once a year or something along those lines. So in the way I did this, common cold would actually score higher than pancreatic cancer. So again, it's up to you guys. We're not going to dictate to you guys how to score and how to rank your needs, but we want you to come up with a system as a team that will rank your needs, because we want you to generate basically as a list of needs and then score them. So here's another example, a way to manage patients' own health information more reliably across providers and hospitals. That's a hard one, but how would you come up with a way to score this? That's a challenge question for everyone. So our deliverable in about 2 weeks, and we can go through this in more detail, but we basically want to organize your observations, and then we want you to identify your top 10 needs as a team and rank them from 1 to 10, and with the criteria there that you use to rank them. So in order to do this, we want you to practice scoping, use the background research, and then filter. So even if you generate, let's say, 50 needs as a team or 100 needs, we want you to filter down to the top 10, okay? And then for the top need statement, we want you to prepare a need spec presentation. This is going to be something like 5 slides or less. We'll give you more details in the coming week, but a very short presentation. What is the need? Why is it a problem? What are the existing solutions? Who are the key stakeholders and how are they affected by it? And what is the market analysis? And remember, this whole time, we don't want to hear of any solutions, just the need and the issues around the need. So that's all I have today, guys. I can take maybe one question, if there's any questions.
Do we have any question? Javi can answer one question, right? Javi, one question?
Yeah, one question.
Okay, so I got one question, Javi. We still have 1 hour to go in the program today. So what I wanted to do is go over some of your slides. I know you have to leave the meeting, and it's okay. It was predicted for you to leave this time. I wanted to go over some of your slides and make some specialist appointment on antimicrobial resistance and on health, and then go back to the same need statement that they already did and try to improve them a little bit within the groups, and then they will think during these 2 next weeks on the deliverables that you gave to them, also with the support of the documents that we're gonna spread to them, we're gonna share with them. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds great, Marcelo. I think if they can send me any revised need statements by the end of the session today.
Okay.
Then also, yeah, if you guys can review any slides, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I think as you do your preparation for the site visits next session, think about this. Think about how we're going to structure these need statements. You guys can even come up with need statements based on the reading that you're going to be reading. But remember, it's always best when you have validation across multiple sources. Observations, the research, and then expert opinion, expert feedback. So, take into account that these might be just prototype need statements, and that they'll have to iterate and become, evolve as you get more information through the other sources of feedback.
Yeah, as I understood, the deliverable is for our next meeting in 2 weeks, right? The 10 need statement that you're asking them.
Well, I want them to have, let me see here. Whoops, sorry. Where did I put it?
Because they will do the visit in the next meeting. So
I wanted it to be due at the end of the weekend. So they have the meeting is on the Well, the meeting is on the 29th, right?
Yeah,
The
28, 29.
So I wanted the 10 needs statements submitted by the end of the day on the 30th.
By the end of the day of the 29th, on Saturday. Okay.
No, 30th.
Oh, the third. Okay, so after the visits that we're going to do next week, next.
Yeah, then we have time to create the need statements and do this.
Okay.
Start doing some of the pre-work ahead of time, but they have until the end of Sunday because they might change the need statement based on the observation.
Yeah, of course, of course.
But given the short timing, I would recommend them to start working on the background reading and things like that before. But ultimately, what they're going to have to do is create on one of the slides, on one of the needs, the top need. That's where I want to see the market research and the stakeholders. I don't need to see it for all 10 needs, just for one need.
One need, the top one.
What are the existing solutions? What are the current, what's the current description of the problem? I'll send a write-up by the end of today in terms of what that presentation needs to look like.
Okay.
To be sent out until the end of the day on Sunday.
Okay, great.
Marcel, we normally give students, 1 or 2 days to do all of that, right? To do the need finding, the observations, and create the need statements and do the write-up. So these guys get an extra 2 weeks ahead of time, but they don't get to do the observations till the end. So I think that, we can talk about the deliverable, but I think that we can talk about the timing if we want to give them more time. But I think they should start to put that together by that time, and they can always revise it. We're not these aren't final versions. Think of these as prototypes.
Yeah, prototyping the needs.
Up to the project, the end of the project, because we've seen teams change their need statement up until the last day before the final presentation. And actually, in 2 of the programs that I've run,
it's like the title of our scientific report. Okay, it's the last thing you write down. You do the research, you do methodology, you do discussion, results, and whatever, and then finally you change the title of your manuscript. That's how science works as well.
And 2 of the programs that we've run, actually, the teams that changed in the last day, they changed their need completely from one need to a totally new need. But they've done all the research already to validate the new need. Those are the teams that actually had the most successful projects. It really doesn't have to be, don't try to be too stressed out about locking in early, but you want to do your best research and provide the best information and do your best so that as you iterate, it's based on the foundation of the research that you've done so far. So,
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you guys. If there's any questions, feel free to email me. You have my email address. And I will send back, my comments on these needs and by tomorrow. And then, thank you guys for your time, and hopefully this was useful.
Yeah, that was very, very useful. So let's give cheers to Javi now. Javi, thank you very much for sticking with us this whole afternoon, the whole morning there in California.
No problem.
And have a nice weekend. We'll talk to you later.
See you soon, and we'll talk to you guys all soon. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Well, people, let me just shut down this. Bom, o que eu quero fazer agora é o seguinte. Primeiro, eu vou introduzir o Rafael Duarte e a equipe deles. Nós temos os alunos de iniciação científica. O Rafael está aqui, eu comentei com vocês ontem, ele faz parte de um programa. Ele Bom, eu vou deixar o Rafael se apresentar porque ele tem um domínio bem maior do que ele veio fazer aqui, mas na verdade eles estão aqui como observadores, eles, os alunos, né? Eles têm um programa bem interessante e ele entrou em contato recente comigo e viu a possibilidade de interação entre o que eles estão fazendo e o que a gente está desenvolvendo aqui, em metodologias observacionais. Tá? Então o Rafael vai explicar para vocês o papel deles e eu quero que vocês sintam-se à vontade aqui na nossa casa, né? Eventualmente a gente não vai estar aqui na sala 303, vai estar por aí. Era bom vocês ficarem em contato da Giovana, que é a nossa assistente, que vai saber se a gente não está aqui onde a gente está. Se nós estamos na Hot Milk, se nós estamos no iLab, no Bloco Verde, enfim. Já posso antecipar que dia 28 à tarde a gente não está aqui, nós vamos estar no hospital fazendo visita, numa estação de tratamento de água, e no dia 5 de outubro também nós não vamos estar aqui. Então, Rafael, por favor.
Obrigado, professor. Boa tarde, obrigado por receber a gente aqui. Como o professor Marcelo falou, tivemos uma conversa meio recente, tanto é que não deu nem para a gente preparar muito bem a nossa interface com vocês, assim, senão acho que teríamos nos apresentado previamente, teria tido uma conexão um pouco maior. Mas é assim que surgem algumas soluções que vocês vão desenvolver durante o projeto de vocês também. O nosso grupo, eu faço parte do BPG, que é o Programa de Pós-Graduação de Engenharia de Produção em Sistemas. Sou engenheiro de produção, mestre e doutorando em produção também. Eu e o Rafael Kluska, que não esteve aqui, está com uma virose. Quase podia ser um peso de vocês, para essa matéria, né? Então, nós estamos orientando um grupo de 5 iniciação científica, tecnológica. Aqui nós temos 3 e os outros 2 rapazes também não vieram. Um pouco estranho, as garotas parecem mais do que os rapazes. Tem uma tendência aqui, parece. E o ponto é que o nosso grupo está pesquisando atualmente projetos exploratórios. Como que o projeto exploratório pode ser estruturado e executado? O que seria um projeto exploratório? Como somos da engenharia de produção, engenharia industrial, costumamos ter as coisas mais ou menos controladas. Com um objetivo final logo no começo, e tem alguns ajustes no meio do caminho. Mas, em alguns casos, como é o caso de vocês, a gente tem um escopo muito abstrato, ou, às vezes, não tanto, mas com um certo nível de abstração. Um orçamento também, não sabe-se muito bem o que vai ser, se vai ter patrocinador, se não vai ter, qual que é o tempo que também é esperado para ter esse retorno. Então, o nível de incerteza é muito elevado. E devido ao nosso desconhecimento e necessidade de conhecer melhor esse tipo de projeto, começamos essa pesquisa. E como o trabalho de vocês vai ter ali atualmente 6 grupos?
6 grupos de 7.
6 grupos de 7 integrantes, que dentro de um contexto dado vão ter que desenvolver soluções que também ainda não estão totalmente claras. O nosso grupo estaria observando esses grupos, documentando isso, essa documentação. Então, vai ser interessante para a gente e acredito para vocês também, de certa forma. E dessa forma podemos trabalhar em conjunto, onde esperamos não atrapalhar o trabalho de vocês, é uma meta nossa, assim, então avisem caso esteja tendo algum problema com isso. O professor Marcelo pode me avisar também. A partir dessas observações, como por exemplo hoje, vocês têm ali um contexto que deveria ser criado uma definição melhor de qual é o problema de vocês. A gente foi conversando enquanto eu observava as interações, e na engenharia nós fazemos coisas muito similares de formas diferentes. Ali tinha frequência e incidência. Na produção a gente utiliza a ferramenta chamada GUT, não sei se vocês também acabam utilizando, que trata de gravidade, urgência e tendência de piora, que poderia, por exemplo, ser substituída uma pela outra, com pouco impacto, ou talvez até com alguns benefícios. Então, a partir dessa generalização do que vocês fazem, comparando com o que a gente faz, comparando com o que outros grupos de pesquisa fazem, a ideia é criar um modelo que seja apto a ser utilizado num nível mais abstrato por qualquer pesquisa ou por um grande número de pesquisas. E o objetivo final do nosso projeto também é criar ferramentas que deem suporte a isso. Talvez ferramentas tecnológicas, um site ou um recurso que vai ajudar nesse processo, ou mesmo com boas práticas ali, como a norma a ser referenciada. E acredito que vai beneficiar não só a engenharia, não só a medicina, mas qualquer área onde tenha pesquisas desse gênero.
Ótimo, excelente, Rafael. Eu já vou dar a palavra para vocês se apresentarem também, né, para ficar mais conhecidos do grupo. Só queria fazer um comentário, Rafael, do que você falou, né, que eles não devem se preocupar em estarem sendo observados, porque uma das principais partes do programa vai ser quando vocês forem no hospital, na fazenda e na estação, observar. Então, assim, eles também vão estar desenvolvendo isso. Então, se eles não querem ser observados, eles não deveriam estar aqui, porque eles vão observar os outros também, né? Então, é um caminho de 2 vias. E embora a nossa conversa foi há poucos dias atrás, né, Rafael? Eu achei extremamente pertinente, eu acho que dar visibilidade para o programa. A gente vai ter um feedback é quase como uma auditoria externa gratuita, né? Mas vocês não devem pensar que estão sendo auditados, vocês estão sendo observados, né? E nós vamos ter um feedback disso daí, e eu queria que vocês pudessem rapidamente se apresentar e para a turma conhecer vocês.
Meu nome é Thaís, eu faço engenharia de produção, estou atualmente no 6º fatorial, quem conhece, né, o 6º semestre, como 7º. Não sei de fazer, é uma piadinha que a gente faz lá em números. Então, eu trabalho com BI, uma empresa de e-commerce, e eu já trabalho com estudo de dados e melhoria de processos e qualidade de processos. E agora estamos aí nessa jornada aí para melhoria de processos e conhecimento, digamos assim, né? Generalizando. Então, a gente vai se ver bastante por aí. Meu nome é Gabriela, eu estou no 8º período de produção, mas vou me formar em 2020, então eu já fiz um programa de hiPUC na área de healthcare. Nós tentamos aplicar a simulação para melhorar a linha do pronto-socorro. A gente conhece um pouco, bem superficial, assim, mas está um pouco familiarizado. E agora a gente está entrando nessa de hiPUC na área de projetos. Muito obrigada pela oportunidade.
Eu sou a Ana, como eu tinha me apresentado ontem. Eu não tinha comentado meu curso, eu faço engenharia civil, estou no 2º período. Então, eu estou entrando nesse mundo acadêmico, assim, então a gente estou me interessando bastante pela pesquisa, até tenho um projeto de pesquisa depois que eu quero usar a bactéria para ver, não sei se vocês conhecem o cimento que se reconstitui, como que é o nome dele? Se regenera, que eles chamam. É o bioconcreto, parece. Eu tenho interesse em fazer no asfalto, para ver se a gente consegue.
Obrigado, pessoal. Então, vocês são todos bem-vindos, vocês podem continuar aqui, porque nós temos uma atividade ainda. Vocês perceberam que o Ravi é workaholic. Não sei se vocês perceberam nos comentários dele. Então, dia 28 nós vamos fazer a visita, dia 29 vocês vêm para cá, para a gente ter o nosso encontro presencial, e eles que vocês têm até dia 30, meia-noite, para entregar o need statement para ele. Esse é o Ravi, né? A gente conhece, tá? Então, assim, nós temos mais um tempo. Por favor, fique à vontade. E o que eu combinei com o Ravi, disse para vocês, né? Que eu vou revisar alguns comentários e fazer algumas inserções, algumas observações de especialista aqui, para tentar ajudar vocês a refinar o needs de vocês, né? Então, assim, essa mulher, ela chegou nos Estados Unidos, mas ela fez vários procedimentos lá na Índia, né? Veja, o que é central aqui, ó? Ela ficou 2 anos antes dela ser hospitalizada, foi hospitalizada várias vezes na Índia. Primeiro, no Brasil, vamos tentar transpor Brasil, Índia, Brasil, né? São realidades não tão semelhantes assim, mas algumas coisas são bem semelhantes. O que vocês acham? Todo paciente que é hospitalizado no Brasil, colhe-se um swab retal para ver se ele é colonizado por bactéria muito resistente? Seria um sonho, né? Mas alguns hospitais fazem isso. E vocês vão ficar mais surpresos ainda. O hospital do trabalhador, um hospital público, faz. E eles têm um sistema de controle de infecção excelente. Agora, tem hospitais lindos, maravilhosos, no Batel, aí, que vocês conhecem, não preciso dizer nome, que não faz. Então, assim, aquele pré-conceito que a coisa pública é sempre pior, é um pré-conceito, é totalmente equivocado. Existem casos e casos. Não estou generalizando, dizendo que sempre o público é melhor. Não, isso também não é fato, tá? Mas não tem esse tipo de preconceito. Então, assim, quando ela já chegou com a infecção. Então, assim, será que essa infecção não poderia ter sido evitada? Não nos Estados Unidos, né? Porque ela ficou 2 anos sofrendo múltiplos internamentos lá na Índia. Então, ela trouxe essa infecção. Estou aproveitando o exemplo do Ravi, que foi excelente, né? Ele captou muito bem esse caso aí, para vocês refinarem daqui a pouco o need statement de vocês, tá? Bom, resistente a 14 diferentes antibióticos, todas as opções disponíveis no hospital. Aí o Ravi, claro, ele é um engenheiro mecânico, que trabalhou com cardiologia, óbvio, não tem obrigação nenhuma de saber isso. O quanto que isso é frequente no Brasil, cada vez mais. Vocês lembram dos slides de ontem, quando eu mostrei a incidência de Aqui ele não fala, mas a grande possibilidade desta enterobactéria resistente a carbapenêmicos ser uma KPC. Então aqui tem um problema de caracterização, ela não está tão bem caracterizada. Ficou, talvez no artigo tenha, né? Qual a chance dessa enterobactéria resistente a carbapenêmicos ser uma KPC no Brasil? No Paraná, 85%, com certeza. Por que eu sei dizer isso? Por que eu posso afirmar isso com segurança? Porque a gente tem esse dado, nós vamos acompanhando esse dado há 10 anos. Faz 10 anos que a gente pesquisa KPC no LACEN Paraná, a gente sabe. Então, assim, na área de resistência antimicrobiana, o enfoque One Health, vocês vão sentir muita dificuldade de encontrar dados. E dado é fundamental. Vocês viram o Harley falando várias vezes disso. Quando vai na área humana, você ainda encontra artigos, pesquisas. Quando vai para a área veterinária, diminui bastante o número de dados. Quando vai para a área ambiental, então, pior ainda. Né? Então, assim, a gente tem que ir atrás de fontes. Nós estamos tentando trazer uma fonte aqui, Diego, que deve vir aqui dia 28 à noite, depois da visita, que ele vai trazer dados sobre o consumo de antibióticos em animais, que eu nunca tinha visto. Ele mostrou uma tabela no Skype, nossa, eu fiquei maravilhado, né? Não deu tempo de fazer um print screen. Mas, assim, são dados que ele tem por causa do sindicato ao qual ele é ligado. Então, ele tem que pedir autorização para saber se ele pode apresentar aqui no programa. Mas vai ser priceless, porque é um dado que não é público, não está por aí e extremamente relevante para a nossa área. Né? Então, vocês vão sentir muitas vezes dificuldade de encontrar dados. Né? Aí, veja, essa amostra saiu do hospital, foi mandada para o CDC, confirmou e que não tinha nenhum antibiótico efetivo. Nós imaginamos, nós estamos terminando uma análise, temos que fazer uma evolução do Kibana lá, Alexandre, porque a gente precisa cruzar dados. Eu quero saber quantas bactérias são resistentes a carbapenem, eu consigo. Quantas bactérias são resistentes a polimixina, eu consigo também. Quantas são resistentes a tigiciclina, também consigo. Mas agora eu preciso cruzar. Quantas são resistentes a carbapenêmicos, polimixina e tigiciclina ao mesmo tempo? Isso ainda eles não encontraram um jeito de fazer. Assim que conseguir, nós vamos ter o dado também. De qual é o percentual de cepas pan-resistentes, que é o nome dessa daqui. Então, se ela é uma pan-resistente, muito provavelmente ela é uma KPC. É uma KPC, mesmo não estando aqui o dado. Né? E aí ele fala que aí eles fizeram um estudo de prevalência. Claro, fizeram coletas de pacientes de contactantes, nenhum deles tinha CRE. Então, assim, estabelecendo a hipótese de que provavelmente de onde veio essa bactéria? Da Índia, ela já chegou com a bactéria. Então, veja, e por que esse exemplo é fantástico? Porque ele mostra a questão de que resistência antimicrobiana é global. Na verdade, foi quase desta maneira que aconteceu com a NDM. Por que a Inglaterra hoje é um dos países que mais investem em prevenção global da resistência antimicrobiana? Porque eles perceberam que eles não são uma ilha. Não, mas a Inglaterra é uma ilha, professor. Não, eles não são. Quando se trata de resistência antimicrobiana, eles têm lá, dentre os 8 milhões de habitantes da Inglaterra, uns 3 milhões são imigrantes. E eles vêm, voltam, entram e saem. E o penúltimo gene de resistência mundialmente conhecido chama-se o gene NDM. Já ouviram falar do NDM? New Delhi metalobeta-lactamase, porque foi originado de Nova Delhi, na Índia. E o caso é extremamente parecido com esse daqui. É um paciente que era indiano, que morava na Suécia, que voltou para a Índia fazer turismo médico, fez uma cirurgia, piorou, foi internado, voltou para a Suécia, ficou ruim, foi para o hospital de novo, e no hospital detectaram uma enterobactéria resistente a carbapenem. Pesquisaram tudo quanto é gene de resistência, não acharam, até que descobriram um gene novo, New Delhi metalobeta-lactamase. Meses depois, essa bactéria estava na Índia, no Paquistão, na Suécia, obviamente, e na Inglaterra. E aí de lá ela... Então ali que eles conseguiram sensibilizar o David Cameron para fazer o estudo do Lord O'Neill, que deu no que deu. Né? Porque eles viram que não adiantava nada. Né? Eles são um mundo globalizado. Então tem uma série de lessons to be learned here. Né? Uma série, tá? Outro comentário. Vamos lá. Por que ele não está avançando aqui?
Põe o mouse para a direita. do Cotinei. Daí ele entra na tela.
Aí, agora foi. Tá. Bom, eu quero que vocês voltem a trabalhar nos leads e depois a gente pode falar disso daqui depois, tá? Ó, agora, eu vou deixar essa frase projetada, tá? Porque essa frase aqui é essencial, tá? Vocês têm que, de preferência, a turma de vocês fez isso. Eu acho muito didático. Coloquem cores diferentes na frase de vocês, tá? Quem que é a população, quem que é o problema de uma cor, quem que é a população de outra cor e qual que é o outcome, qual que é o resultado. Se vocês usarem esse código de cor, vai dar certeza. Experimentem classificar as frases que vocês já têm. Vocês não vão conseguir pôr as 3 cores na maioria, muitas delas. Uma das que melhor foi, eu fui lá e estraguei, né? Fiz vocês mudarem, porque eu olhei muito rápido e falei, muda pra cá porque tá muito específico. E não tava boa. Agora, essa é a questão do problema específico ser mais fácil de resolver e talvez menos lucrativo. E o problema mais amplo ser mais abrangente, mais difícil de resolver e mais disruptivo é fato. Vocês não vão sair daqui no final de 3 meses com uma solução para resolver o problema One Health. Vocês viram ontem o organograma. Nós não temos essa expectativa, né? Mas eu vou contar uma breve história antes de vocês voltarem a trabalhar nos lead statement de vocês nos últimos 30 minutos. Tem vários projetos na área de inovação. Uns 4, 5. O Matheus trabalhando num. Cadê o Matheus? Tá lá. O Matheus e o Adam trabalharam num que já está na 4ª equipe que trabalha comigo nesse projeto. Que é um projeto de identificação rápida. Identificação rápida não é nem rápida. É uma base de dados para identificação de micro-organismos no laboratório. Nossa, Piloneto, mas isso tem inúmeros, tem automação, tem mal de TOF, tá? Só que dos 18 mil laboratórios que existem no Brasil, uns 12 mil não usam automação, muito menos mal de TOF. Então, assim, 2/3 ainda usam identificação manual. E as bases de dados para identificação dessas bactérias são da década de 80, da década de 70. Não existia não existia Chronobacter, não existia Cruivera, Cosaconia, Phytobacter, essas espécies nem existiam lá. Então, ou seja, esses sistemas não identificam essas bactérias. E aí tem colegas nossos que já vieram participar de bancas dos alunos, que fizeram TCC, de graduação, de especialização. Por que você não publicou ainda? Primeiro, porque não está pronto. Não está do jeito que a gente gostaria, não está com a performance que a gente gostaria. Segundo, porque a gente investe energia numa série de coisas e esses processos são demorados. Então, faz no mínimo 6 anos que eu estou trabalhando com esse projeto. A outra coisa é assim, nós não achamos um modelo de negócio ideal ainda. Porque os kits, as pessoas não vão comprar o sistema para implantar no seu laboratório. Não vão investir isso. Talvez a maneira seja trabalhar com o comerciante, com o produtor, né, que fabrica o kit. Tá? Por outro lado, agora nós começamos esse mês a trabalhar com outro sistema, e aí vem os leads, que é a questão da continuação do teu trabalho, né, Júlia, da questão de detectar resistência à polimixina, que é um problema em todos os laboratórios hoje. Por quê? De 5 métodos que existem, 4 são proibidos. Não é que são proibidos, não podem ser realizados porque a performance deles é muito ruim. Eles dão resultados falso resistente e falso sensível. Então a Anvisa proibiu, não pode usar esse. Só pode usar microdilição em caldo, que é caríssima. E agora nós estamos aperfeiçoando um método e provavelmente, no curto prazo de tempo, vamos conseguir disponibilizar isso para os laboratórios, que deve ser rapidamente difundido, porque é rápido, barato e simples. Então, quem não quer um método que é mais rápido do que você já tem, é mais barato e mais simples? Qual o argumento para você não usar? A performance dele não é 100%. Sim, mas o outro que custa 30 vezes mais, a performance é 63%. Então, assim, é questão de oportunidade também, né? E na resistência tem muito isso. Quem chegasse há 1 ano atrás, no Brasil, com um kit rápido para detectar Zika vírus, ia ficar milionário. Como ficaram, né? Teve indústria que vendeu milhares, dezenas de milhares de kits. Tá? Agora, se quem chegar hoje com um kit para Zika vírus, agora eu desenvolvi um kit rápido, um PCR em tempo real de 30 minutos para fazer numa máquina aqui. O que é Zika vírus hoje? Já foi. Né? A onda do Zika vírus foi ano passado. Na verdade, foi nem ano passado, foi em 2016. Quando o pessoal estava vindo, eles queriam desistir de vir para o Brasil. Lembra disso? Tinha um pesquisador de Stanford que não quis, quase desistiu de vir para o hiPUC por causa do Zika vírus. Então, assim, é muita questão da oportunidade, também, do momento, né, e de você ser rápido. Então, às vezes, não queiram resolver o problema global de One Health de tudo. Vocês não vão conseguir. Tá? Vamos voltar para os need statements. Eu vou pedir para o Guilherme me ajudar. A gente vai passar aí entre vocês. E tente, então, fazer o código de cores, entendeu? Quem que é o problema de uma cor, pintem a frase que diz o problema de uma cor, a população de outra cor e o outcome de uma terceira cor. Daí vocês vão enxergar melhor se o need statement de vocês tem ou não. E os comentários do Ravi e mais esses para vocês tentarem melhorar. E é só um exercício. Nós vamos trabalhar muito com need statement. Mas lembre, nada de solução. O Ravi falou isso umas 50 vezes, né? Tá bom? Nada de solução. Ok? Então voltem para os grupos, a gente vai passear entre vocês. Vamos ver se até às 5 horas a gente consegue terminar e encerrar por hoje.
Que a gente... Para quem mesmo? Pessoal, uma dica para vocês, uma forma que a gente usou para fazer os nossos needs, que facilitou bastante, era o que, para quem mesmo e por quê. Isso você consegue afunilar, porque muitas vezes a gente vai lá e coloca a população, mas a gente se restringe. Quando você responde a pergunta do para quem mesmo, você acaba especificando o teu need. Então, isso evita que vocês façam coisas muito amplas. Então, o que, para quem mesmo e por quê. Isso facilita muito.